How do you remix famous songs? Where do you find the multi-tracks? What software do you use? Is it legal? These are questions I want to answer for you now. My name is David Miller. I am a multimedia artist in my home studio, Primordial Creative in Los Angeles. We're moving, so we have a lot of junk in the background. And this is going to be one about music. Remixing songs that people know from famous artists is a fun pastime that I have been involved in probably since the beginning of my interest in making music. In the mid-90s, I learned a lot from Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails. They had these EPs broken and fixed, and when the fixed remix EP came out, it was so wild that my friend Jason and I, in high school, we hooked up 2 tape decks, and we were like making things longer by looping bits, slowing it down. And when I got involved with a digital program called Cool Edit Pro, close to the end of the 90s and around 2000, I found out how I could cut segments and how I could measure loops. And Cool Edit Pro morphed into Adobe Audition. That's what I'm using right now to record this particular YouTube video. The best thing for remixing songs is if you have all the parts as clean as possible. So you can call them multi-tracks, you can call them stems. Sometimes remixes are just released as the basic loops. I remember the very first access to basic loops I had was the Shaman Move Any Mountain. They released those on a CD single, and so the basic loop would be like 8 seconds, 10 seconds of the drum beat of the keyboard. You could stick it in a program and have it reiterate as many times as you wanted. Nowadays, it's more common to get the stems, meaning the entire 4 minutes of a song, but it's only the guitars, or it's only the drums, or it's only the bass, or it's only the vocal, or it's only the keyboards. Nine Inch Nails is a good band to start with if you want to remix stuff, because there are actual websites. There used to be one, nin.remix, and I think that's down. It was up for many years, and it had tons of full multi-tracks of the original songs. And now if you just Google NIN multi-tracks, there's other sites that host the same exact material. But what's great about that is that you get very clean, well-organized multi-tracks of a band that is well known for its immaculate production. And it's very easy to pull these things apart and maybe make your own version. You get an ambient version, so there's no drums and there's no guitars, it's just the keys and the vocal. Bands that actually release their multi-tracks are the easiest way to access multi-tracks, of course. And many of them do it through contests. So a band like Young the Giant released the stems for Mind Over Matter. Radiohead released Reckoner and Nude, I think are the 2 songs. I could be incorrect in if it's Reckoner or something else, but I believe those were the ones around the In Rainbows era. And many of my other favorite bands, maybe Manifesto, Curve, have all had some form of remix contest. The second place you could find remix stems is kind of an unlikely one, but the Rock Band and Guitar Hero video games, by their nature, required the multi-tracks for each song, because when you play this game, you're going to play the drums, and it's going to be to a version of the song that doesn't have the drums. So a lot of famous songs found their way there as multi-tracks. Bands like Faith No More, Jane's Addiction, The Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Queen. You can get the multi-tracks for every major Queen song by virtue of these Rock Band and Guitar Hero games. Now, buying the game won't get you the multi-tracks, but people have ripped them and put them online, and Soulseek is the best way I've found to do searches for these kinds of things. The files are .ogg files, and I used to have to use Audacity, which is a free audio editing software, to load up like all the multitracks to a Killer song, a Beastie Boys song, and now I just use Adobe Audition. It opens the OGG files fine. The next way to get multitracks is using a site, and there's more than one of them, where you can actually load a song and then separate out vocal, keyboard, drums, guitar, bass. Whether it uses AI or not to do this, I don't really know. I know that the site works. The quality of these separations is lower because it's finding particular frequencies and then eliminating the ones that don't fit the model for a vocal. And so you're gonna get like this kind of watery sound, but if you're gonna distort it anyways, if you're gonna stick it in a like GarageBand and then throw it on a guitar amplifier or some kind of vocoder, then the quality level really doesn't matter. But these are all methods on how we get clean versions of songs to remix them. There's also plenty of YouTube resources and channels out there that have isolated instruments and vocals, and some of those have links in their descriptions where you can backtrack to, say, a Patreon that contains higher quality versions of these. Once you have your multitracks, the next step is figuring out the BPM and the key of the song you're working with. This is relatively easy. It's a Google search. There's also many websites like SongBPM that feature that information. Sometimes it's wrong, sometimes it's wildly off, and you'll find that out when you start queuing up instruments that are of the same BPM and they're not fitting properly. If you need to find the BPM on your own, there are plenty of apps, including within GarageBand, where you can just tap along to the beat of the song and it'll generate the BPM that way. The key of the song relates to the main notes that are played in the song, so you don't really need a key if you're going to be adding drums, but if you're adding something like a bass line, guitar riff, a synth, and you want it to sound good with the other parts that you're working with of the original song, you're going to want to stay in the same key. And I get most of my extra parts for songs through Splice. This is a website that has royalty-free samples, and they're easily searchable by type of instrument, key, and BPM. The actual remixing part of the song begins in two ways for me. One is I have a really strong idea of what I want to do, or I want to focus on a particular vocal phrase. I want to make use of the bass line. I want to make this song a certain genre. In that case, I'll search out samples and effects that fit my criteria. The other way is where I really don't know what I want to do with the song. In that case, I load up all the parts of the multitrack in GarageBand and I can play them back, start playing with filters and effects, replacing certain sections, moving sections forward, and this is a little more organic process, feeling it out. But either way, whether I have a plan or I don't, I find that some remixes end up great and some end up like nothing, and that's the way it goes. But it's all a wonderful learning experience. Can you release them under your own name? Can you charge money for remixes that you made of other people's stuff? Legally, no. And I think it's a bad idea to even try, because when you do things like that, it's disrespectful to the original artist, and that disrespect will come back to you in the form of bad karma. And can you remix things and release them for free? Of course you can. I mean, if you're not making money on it, then I think it's perceived today as almost like a badge of honor that other people like your music enough to make club versions, ambient versions. But I also think a lot of authentic artists realize that the way that most of us learn how to make music is by imitation, copying, covering songs. All the ways that we learn to play guitar are by playing songs that we like, and that sort of defines the way that we end up playing and the songs we end up writing. And production is no different. I've learned more about songwriting, what goes into a song, why parts are the way they are, why structure is the way it is, by remixing famous songs that I've always loved, more than I ever did just by like getting on a piece of paper and drawing structures and trying to sort it out on my own, you know? And it's also helped me define my own production style because when I would do a Young the Giant or a Faith No More or a Pop Will Eat Itself or a 9 Inch Nails remix, you know, I'll gravitate towards my own particular tastes and prejudices rather than the presentation that they had. Doesn't mean I'm disrespecting the original version. It means that I'm engaging with the track in a way that's sort of beyond a regular fan level. So most of my remixes use breakbeats and have ambient passages and, you know, get rid of things like strings, orchestral stuff, because I'm not really into that, but I'm into grimy sounds, bass and beats, more organic beats than like techno or like fancy production dubstep type beats. I like them if they're grimy, but you know, again, it's just a prejudicial issue. And it's also fun when people actually make good remixes. Now there's a lot of bad remixes out there, but that never takes away from the original song. The good ones that add some element that we haven't thought of, or in the case of Queen, you know, they seem to constantly put out new versions of Queen material because they want it to engage with the modern audience instead of people who just grew up with it in the 70s and the 80s and, you know, stuck with it there. I think that's great. I mean, if I went to an event and I heard a really amazing remix of a Queen song that sounded kind of modern but kept the original spirit, I would really appreciate it. So highly encourage people to get involved in remixing. Definitely a way to carry on the continuity of creativity, because creativity is a continuum. It's not a vacuum, and you should never feel like you're not being your fullest creative person just because you're working with the materials laid down by somebody way more advanced and way more professional than you. If anything, you're going to learn a lot. And also, you know, if you love your creation so much, you're like, man, I put a lot of effort in this. I wish I could release this as my own song. Here's what you do. You do your remix, and then you strip out the parts that you don't own. And suddenly you've got a structure that you can build on as an homage to the original song instead of pretending like you created it from whole cloth yourself. Anyways, best of luck to you in your own remixing. Talk to you next time.